I started using real objects in my work from the very first time. I remember in the Navy, I painted a picture of somebody, and I couldn't, and I didn't know about painting yet, and I used blood for the red. From me.
And it was Bob Rauschenberg who opened my eyes really to what we then called, I don't know what you call it now, representational art. What do you call it now?
But I think also that with Rauschenberg, it's not just the fact that he uses commonplace objects or things we are familiar with in our lives now, but that he places them in such a way so that you really see them.
Autobiography. Billboard poster published in 1968, New York. Port Arthur, Texas, October 22nd, 1925. Mother Dora, father Ernest, grandparents Holland, Dutch, Swedish, German, Cherokee.
I'm a quarter Cherokee.
Queen Grammar School.
Which really isn't very interesting to the Church of Christ ministers that put our family tree together.
High School. Thomas Jefferson High School, graduated 1942. University of Texas. U.S. Navy, 2.5 years, neuropsychiatric technician. Family moved to Lafayette, Louisiana, with sister Janet, born April 23rd, 1930.
I think maybe coming out of really being, excuse me, Mother, real white trash, authentically, gave me a sense of absolutely no fear of any other category. I never decided to be an artist. I grew up in Port Arthur, Texas, and no one knew what an artist was. It wasn't until I got out of the Navy that, well, in the Navy, I saw my first oil paintings, and then I knew that something was going on. I always drew a lot.
After Navy, returned home, left home, worked in Los Angeles, moved to Kansas City to study painting at Kansas City Art Institute, went to Paris 1947, met Sue Weil, studied Académie Julian.
I went out on the streets and painted, but I was so sensually, physically involved in the paint and the color that I couldn't even use brushes. So I would paint with my hands. And I knew that this was some kind of obsession, and that what I needed was real discipline. I could have gone on, I think, just painting with my hands and doing a mess forever, because I really love painting. But I knew that would only force me to buy a new pair of pants.
(1948), Black Mountain College, North Carolina. Disciplined by Albers, learned photography.
I went to Black Mountain because I needed discipline. And Albers, there was an article in Time magazine about Albers was the world's greatest disciplinarian.
Worked hard but poorly for Albers. made contact with music and modern dance.
I forget the exact details of how I first met Bob, but it was, as you say, at Black Mountain. It had the inspiring presence of two people, Joseph and Annie Albers, and they represented together, so to speak, the totality of human possibility. Where Joseph was strict, Annie was free. They were really the pair of opposites. And they played that way, or they acted that way, and were received that way in the society. And though Bob was studying with Joseph Albers, I think his nature was closer to Annie's.
I've always balked at education. It's something, the moment that something appears as though it's something that you ought to know, I automatically think I can do without it, because that's just going to interfere with learning something else. I think each person is their own adventure, and it can't be programmed, it can't be right, it can't be wrong. There's an atmosphere at Black Mountain College which was in every situation except a painting or in the arts was about freedom. In the arts it was about discipline and control of control. There was almost a policing going on at Black Mountain College in the arts. Albers kept a master key, and he would go through the studio as though, I mean, it was just like the police, and make searches to see whether you were working or not, or if you were working, what you were doing, and anything that wasn't a class project was subversive. Now, I don't know if that's Bauhaus or not.
Well, when I was at Black Mountain, it was during the summer, and there were about 100 people, and they had breakfast, lunch, and dinner together in the same dining room on the lake, looking out across to the mountains in the distance. And the food was not particularly good, but the conversation was excellent. I was teaching music, but no one was studying with me. All the exchange of ideas took place in the dining room.
We all ate in a common dining room. That was one of the marvelous things about that school, that you ate in the same situation, students and teachers, and you would find yourself every day at a different table with different people, because it was small enough for that. And also, if you didn't get there in time, you didn't get anything to eat, so you had to get there. So it brought everybody together, and that was lively. That was one of the most marvelous things about the school, I think, that kind of interaction between people.
We gave what has been called the first happening at Black Mountain, and Bob played some old records on one of those Victrolas that has, it's like that image with the dog, you know. He played records on that. Merce danced. Charles Olson read poetry, so did M.C. Richards. David Tudor played. I was up on a lecture, on a ladder giving lectures.
That first summer we did Satie. John Cage did a Satie festival, and we did that Piège de Méduse, the play of Satie. And Fuller, Buckminster Fuller was in it, and Elaine de Kooning, a number of people were in it. It was a marvelous production. It was so full of imagination and all that.
After living in New York, returned to Black Mountain College summer 1951. Started all black and all white paintings.
I had been studying with Albers and did the white paintings in 1951. I wanted to see how far you could push imagery. It was just a natural result, not a gesture, no Dada, no nihilism. I just wanted to see what not painting would look like.
And there was a show of his black paintings. And I was absolutely fascinated by them because although they were all black, the painting was full of variety. There were different kinds of black shiny and black not shiny at all, etc. It was so interesting. Franz Klein was there at the time. Forget what it was he said. Did he say that he liked these paintings so much because they were hopeless? And then he explained that he didn't mean that the paintings were hopeless, but that it was that he felt without any way of resolving them. They were really marvelous. I was so enthusiastic that Bob was delighted, and we became friends immediately. He's always been a marvelous person to know because we didn't have to talk together. We understood without speaking how the other one felt. Almost a sense of identity.
John Cage had a fantastic influence on my thinking. He simply gave me permission to go on thinking the way I was thinking.
It was an extraordinary situation, Black Mountain, and people keep thinking about it because all the people who were there, all those 100 people, I think perhaps without exception, have been active in the society ever since as artists. It was everyone now would like to have another Black Mountain, but you can't force it into existence. It happened at that time.
Returned to New York City 1952. Loft on Fulton Street. Closest friends at this time, dancers and musicians. Worked with found objects, insisting the object material keep its identity.
I started with collage without ever knowing even the word collage. I had done lots of collages, and one day I saw a collage that Picasso had done in 1924, which was 1 year before I was born, and I didn't know about collages. And I thought, oh, how can you do it?
Began red paintings, using comic strips as color ground. Included lights and reflectors.
One of the first things I did in the first collages was to include mirrors, and which would like suck the room or whatever was going on into the piece. And then I went into like light bulbs, where the painting would also be responsible for its own light.
Moved to Pearl Street off Fulton. Jasper Johns lived in the same building and had just painted his first flag. It would be difficult to imagine my work at that time without his encouragement. John Cage was also a generous source of inspiration. It was a rich exchange. Paintings became awkward and physically began being freestanding. Combines, stuffed animals, bed, shoes.
And then the nature of some of the materials I worked with got so impossible physically to figure out how they could be supported that it was obvious that they had no business just hanging flatly on the wall. And that's the beginning of the combines. I was doing sculptures. I tied rocks together, and I hung sheets of paper, like one after another, on a rack, just like out to dry. But the combines, where the painting got just so heavy that I had to call it something else. I guess the bed could be considered the first combine, except that it isn't really, because, I mean, it's not really a combine. There was this quilt, and it was summer, and I didn't need that. I just literally ran out of things to paint on. It also gave me another surface to work on, so it was even economical.
What I remember so much about going down to see the works in the loft is that absolutely enormous pleasure of going in and seeing a new piece that he had worked on or been working on or wasn't finished yet or whatnot. But the incredible kind of way your eye was opened up again. And the first time I saw the wonderful object, I don't ever know what Bob calls these, of course, with the chicken in it. Seeing that down there, I thought, oh, that's simply marvelous. It really makes you think. It makes your thinking change. You think in another way about how anything might be. I think so often that Bob has managed to take some really quite, not necessarily plain thing, but some common object, and in some way, by the way he places it or what he does with it, he dramatizes it in this extraordinary way, so that when you see it again on the street, it becomes quite something particular that you look at, that you realize, oh yes, that's there. that's I think Bob's really marvelous gift, that he really lets you see once again.
I became the lighting man and designer for Merce Cunningham Dance Company. It was awkward but beautiful addition to my work. The dances, the dancers, the collaboration, the responsibilities and trust which are essential in cooperative art, because the most important and satisfying element in my life worked positively with the privateness and loneliness of painting.
Well, the way we have collaborated with Merce Cunningham and with different painters, Bob in particular, is so to speak, no collaboration at all. It was simply a confidence in one another and a decision to make something that would, in an unpredictable way, make use of that painting, that music, and that dance. And very frequently, well, of course, the dancers had to get into the costumes and try out the set and the objects that Bob made. But very frequently, they never heard the music until the audience heard it.
When you collaborate that way, You have to have a willingness to change things, not radically, but you assume a kind of good faith between all the people involved, both the composer and the designer and myself. I said, Bob, I want to wear, this was in Antique Meat, Bob, I want to wear a chair on my back in one of the dances. And he looked at me, and then a few minutes later he said, if you have a chair, can I have a door? And I said, certainly, why not? The collaboration began when Bob was in New York, and we met again, and we saw each other fairly often with John Cage. And I think it sort of occurred to both of us that we might do something together. And I was working on a dance at the time, and I asked him to make something if he would, and he said yes, he would. And he made something which I went to see in his loft. He was down in lower Manhattan then, and I went to see him there, and he had made this marvelous object which became the set we used for the piece, which was an object in the show, in his retrospective show. It's an object that he made out of various bits of materials and comic strips and wonderful colors and bits of wood and boxes and so on, that sits on the stage through which the dancers can go. There is a curtain with a sort of doorway, and under which actually in the dance they moved. And I said it's wonderful immediately.
I'm sure the freedoms that the abstract expressionists indulged in changed very much the possibilities and gave new permissions to every artist. Pollock particularly. Pollock's early paintings were very tight and came out of false fantasy. And when he started dripping, I think his whole body was engaged. It became very personal then. And if he could drip paint, and de Kooning could smear it, and Klein could paint black and white only, really had to change the scene. There wasn't any resistance to the abstract expressionists by like the painters that I knew at that time. I think only Jasper Johns and myself gave them enough respect not to copy them.
1953, erased drawing by Willem de Kooning.
I erased the de Kooning drawing not out of any negative response. I was working then. I was doing all white paintings and all black at the same time. And I love to draw. So I was doing erasure drawings. And de Kooning was the most important artist that day. And so the piece actually began when I knocked on his door and said, I'd like to erase one of your drawings. And he said, come in. He gave me a drawing after he looked through 2 other portfolios of drawings. The first portfolio was filled with drawings that he didn't like. Second portfolio was filled with drawings that he liked, but could be easily erased. He had a third one, which was mixed media, like crayon and all kinds of things. And so I got one of those. He said he wasn't going to make it easy, and he didn't. I spent 4 weeks erasing that drawing with about 15 different types of erasers. And besides that, there's a drawing on the other side.
I'm not sure what the connection and what the history is of the connection with Duchamp on my part and Bob's part and Jasper's part. I had made the music for the Duchamp sequence in Richter's film, Dreams That Money Can Buy. But I so admired Duchamp that I spent no time with him. I didn't want to impose myself on him. It wasn't until 5 or 6 years before he died that I noticed one New Year's Eve, when we were invited to the same parties, that he was beginning to look like a Velázquez painting, a kind of transparency to the skin, and it suggested death to me, so that I decided to be with him as much as possible in the time that remained.
It is difficult to talk about Duchamp because he was never right and he was never wrong. He was always real and important. He really destroyed any other sense of form. He was never surrealist. I think the surrealists were a little bit ashamed of him. He was something very unique, without movement. Duchamp was not an American favorite. He had been in retirement for some time, but he knew everything that was going on. One day he wanted to come and see my work. It was just the first real encounter I'd felt, because most of my friends before that were outside of the painting profession. It was dancers and musicians. I saw Marcel Duchamp's, I don't know what it's called, but it's the stool with the bicycle wheel. And I thought, boy, that's the most fantastic piece of sculpture I've ever seen. Then I found out it was Dada, that it was protest. And protest against what? I mean, there was a beautiful object there already made. So I never really understood Dada.
Began silkscreen paintings to escape familiarity of objects and collage.
everything affects my work if I'm really working. I'll take my images from any source, whether it's Life Magazine, National Geographic, a letter left on this table. I used to have people who would send me special things, and I always avoided special things. I wanted something with the content to have so little information that it would allow room for anybody's imagination. I always select my images to look as little like a particular point of view as possible.
The thing that fascinates me about his work is that everything in it seems to me to be only one of many possibilities. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but any one of his paintings could be different than it is, without being ruined. It could be, so to speak, the same work, but look quite different. What I mean by that is that a portrait, for instance, of Eisenhower, could be a portrait of someone else. Or it might be a tree. I really don't think it makes that much difference.
(1971), made wall assemblages from found cardboard scraps.
Cardboard boxes are everywhere. I'm never out of material. Each one has a brand new history, its own individuality, and I can just intimately share the next experience with it. Material's material, but I was really turned toward cardboard because of its yielding quality. I mean, I don't have to be strong to use it. I've come to terms with my materials. They know and I know that we're going to try something. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I would substitute anything for preconception or deliberateness. I mean, if that moment can't be as fresh and as strange and as unpredictable as what's going on all around you, then it's false. I deal personally with all the experiences that I have, and then I just trust my intuition. I think that my paintings are like one step beyond my head. I mean, they're part of the reaching for contact. And so by the time you've done all this dumb work, then you see it for the first time yourself, just when anybody else does it.
Are you pleased with it?
Love it.
How can you tell it's a good piece?
It may not be, but I love it. It's the last one. I'm not so interested in their being good all the time.
Did you have an idea in mind to begin with?
I didn't have any idea to begin with, just to work. I really just like working, just making things. That's the most important thing.
Did you know when it was done?
I knew it was done when I finished.
He hasn't made a labored effort to arrive at a predetermined goal. He is simply caught something instantaneously. His work seems to be more like a photograph than a photograph is. More like an instantaneous happening.
Worked with Judson Church Group, theater, dance, workshop experimental exchange.
It was very easy for me to start doing theater pieces because I think the object quality of artworks has always been misused and uninteresting. I'm not interested in the specific ego activity of being the one who does anything. I really think that everything is a result of something else. And in theater, it's always that way. I started working in dance because that's most clearly the result of exactly what has happened to you just a few minutes before. I started doing it myself because I like energy. My first theater piece was Pelican, which was done on roller skates because I couldn't dance. I found that my name had been printed already on the program with a footnote saying those with asterisks next to their names are choreographers. I saw my name there and I said, okay, so I'm a choreographer. All right, I'll do a piece. And started.
I keep doing this.
He was a desert as far as admiration goes. He could accept any amount of it. Perhaps that still characterizes him.
Hey, Sarah, do you know Sarah?
1951. First one-man show, Betty Parsons. Paintings mostly silver and white. All paintings destroyed in 2 accidental fires. I went to Italy with painter and friend Cy Twombly. Ran out of money in Rome. Took chance getting job in Casablanca at Atlas Construction Company. Worked 2 months. Got sick. Left.
Good evening, Walter. Don't let that boat sail till we're on.
While traveling in France and Spanish Morocco, constructed rope objects in boxes, showed in Rome and Florence. Critic in Florence said work should be thrown in Arno. I did.
She is the woman in the world I'm most jealous of. Well, rightly so.
I don't like her talking to strangers, even if I know who they are.
No, he's a great fellow. You don't claim.
Yes,
Just kidding, Sven. Here comes the Jody crew.
Black and white show at Stable Gallery, New York, 1953. Misunderstood as gestures and anti-paintings.
Oh, thank you. This is a wonderful night. Absolutely. You know me?
Oh, do I ever?
1958, show at Leo Castelli.
Where the steps.
Gilda, couldn't you go off smiling and take all the cameramen with you? Here she is. She's smiling now.
Hope I see you while you're here.
Okay, go in there and look at my furniture.
I've looked
Hello,
at
Mert.
everything.
He was full of that kind of humor and life and sort of interest in things that he still has.
You look so elegant.
You just say that because everybody says I look like you now.
Those extraordinary kinds of responses to things or ideas, or having ideas about things which were quite different from other people's. And that spirit I remember even then as being marvelous, and it still is.
Well, would you look here, Tom?
I can see you're interested in history.
Oh, no. We need less. Less.
More time and less history.
Bob, the show is
Huh?
great.
Can we make a deal somewhere? Where do you sign up for more time and less history?
Stop it.
Okay.
Less time and more
The show is great. Just beautiful. And the goat is so marvelous. Almost immediately after
Better
you
beard
get
than either of us.
Get that longer time.
See, it had time.
I think all of us always looked the same. We were always recognizable. I would recognize Bob if we could return to that time. I'd know it was he rather than someone else, and I can recognize him now. He hasn't changed, so to speak.
I'm afraid we can't afford to both that long.
Well, whatever it is, bars.